All right, so today I want to talk about this story out of the New York Post, and it's titled Hungry New Yorkers Form Quarter Mile Line for Free Food in Queens. Now, this is again something that I've been pointing out for a while now. We've seen this in multiple countries, and the main point really is that there's still a lot of problems going on out there. Like a lot of people think we're out of the woods. I really don't. Like I've mentioned before, I think this is one of the criticisms of Trump that they're talking about, oh, the economy's roaring again, the stock market's doing really good, which is true, but the stock market isn't really much of a reflection. I mean, it is to some degree, but of how the economy is doing. I mean, if unemployment's high, the economy's not doing good. So that's the thing to point out. And I think this is to a degree a New York problem. I mean, I'm sure most people are well aware that New York is in free fall. They're probably one of the worst states to live in at this moment. Why? Because they had severe lockdown restrictions. They were hit pretty much the hardest. Um, Taxes are going way up. Regulations are through the roof. So most, not most, I don't know what the exact number is, but there's a lot of people moving out of New York. That is the one thing I do know for sure. Um, and what's happening is the city's pretty much going to go under. I mean, I think they have like a $30 billion budget shortfall over the next decade. And that number is only getting worse because more and more people are moving out by the day. So that number is only going to get worse. And the biggest problem, I think, is that in typical leftist fashion, they're not going to admit they're wrong. They'll never admit they're wrong. They'll never admit that the high taxes, high regulation don't work. I mean, I've already seen calls from a lot of these leftists in New York and from the surrounding areas. Oh, we got to raise taxes on the rich. And again, that's just going to make more and more people move out. Like, again, these people are so ignorant, it's not even funny. And I mean, what's going to happen is, again, New York's probably going to go under. A lot of people just move out to these other areas and they'll just destroy the other areas. I mean, Texas is well on its way to going down the way of California. Again, you hear all these idiot Canadians about whenever you bring up Wexit or complaining about the liberals, they're like, "Oh, you just moved to Texas." Like again, these people are so ignorant; it's not even funny. Texas is about as moderate as a state can be. Like people think it's this all gun-toting rednecks, when in reality, that is pretty much the definition of a false stereotype. That yeah, there is some, but if you look at the big cities in Texas, all of them, at least Houston for sure, Austin for sure, Dallas to a degree, they're all Democratic cities. I mean, they're all Democratic run, and the majority of people from there are Democrats. So the idea, again, it's something that's just annoying that people bring up. But the main point being, like I say, is that um, the economic ramifications of this have not shown yet. It's like I say, it's going to take a while for the stuff to show. For all we know, they'll relock things down this winter. For all we know, I mean, I kind of don't think that's the case, but again, it wouldn't surprise me. And I don't think that they got what they want the first time around. And if that happens, I think things will get a lot worse because I think there's a lot of people that just, specifically business owners that just made it by, and they're kind of hoping for things to ramp back up. And if things close down again, and the government can't just keep giving out free money too. This is the other problem too, that these people that support the lockdowns, like they think that the government can just give out free money from now until eternity, but that's not the case. That's not how reality works. So that is the big problem. That's the big point I wanted to get across here, is that I mean, we still have double digit unemployment in Canada, I believe, and if I know we do in Alberta. So the idea that we're out of the woods is not the case. Like it's not the case. And this is the other thing too to point out too, is that um, I believe Canada had pretty much 0% GDP growth. Um, like not the 2 quarters before. I mean Q1 of 2020 and the last quarter of 2019. So what people don't realize is that we were pretty much in recession before the virus even hit. Like people don't. We're going to be coming out of this into at best a barely better than a recession economy. Like people don't realize that. And the reason why we're not, the average person, I mean, I think a lot of people do realize it, but I would say still most people don't, is that the government is pumping so much money into the economy that whenever that stops, then we're going to feel it. Now, if that doesn't stop, then we're going to end up with hyperinflation, or at the very least, maybe not hyperinflation, but inflation that's much higher than can be maintained, because the median incomes aren't going up anytime soon, at least in Canada. But the cost of housing is, the cost of day-to-day goods is, again, the cost of living is, right? Especially in some of these bigger cities. So that is something that people need to look out for, and it's something I've heard that people, oh, we're out of the woods, the economy's great, but oh, there's tons of people hiring. Well, yeah, there's a lot of places hiring, but if you talk to a lot of these people that are hiring, well, there's also record amounts of people applying for those jobs, thus meaning the supply of jobs is still way below what the demand is. And the problem too is that you have, I think, to cap it all off, you have Justin Trudeau and Freeland and all these idiots talking about, oh, the restart needs to be a green economy, and they've never really said exactly what they mean, but I think we all can come up with a pretty good guess, is that it's going to be more regulations, more climate alarmism, more of this garbage that is basically just an FU to Alberta and to Saskatchewan in a lesser degree. Again, which is just going to hurt us more and more. And I think the goal, as far as Alberta goes, and I mean, from their perspective, it's a pretty good idea, is they're just going to basically regulate Alberta out of being able to be a successful province. They're just going to keep regulating things until the point to where we can't, anybody involved in the oil and gas sector can't make a go of things, or at least most people. And because of that, again, there's going to be a lot of people that go from being able to fend for themselves, making good money, or at the very least decent money, to people that are all of a sudden dependent upon the government. And I think that's the goal, is that people are going to become dependent on the government. What happens when they become dependent on the government? Well, they start voting for the Liberals and for the NDP. So I think that's what the goal is. I mean, and if that isn't the goal, that's exactly what's happening, right? Like, if that isn't the goal, that's exactly what's happening from whatever they claim their goal is. So even if that isn't, then that's still what they're achieving. So that's kind of the other thing I wanted to bring up. But again, the economy is not doing very good right now. Anybody telling you different is in a bubble, I believe, or you're not getting a full, honest and objective worldview. Because again, if it was so good, um, unemployment wouldn't be super high. The cost of living wouldn't be going way up, right? So, and that's the problem too. Is that not only that too, people are taking on more and more debt than ever too. I mean, eventually it's going to get to the point to where people can't take on more debt, and people are going to have to default on stuff, which means if that happens all at once again, which it's looking like it may, well, banks are going to have to be bailed out, which is going to cause a whole nother problem, right? Like it's looking like we're inflating another housing bubble, so that's another problem that's probably going to come up at some point. And the biggest problem of all is that governments are never willing to take that step back to take two steps forward, because the problem is that in government, that step back may last 5 to 10, maybe 20 years for all we know. And the problem with that is that it's an almost certainty that a future government will get to take credit for the sacrifices that the other government did. So that's why the government will never cut spending. I don't care if it's a conservative or a liberal government. I mean, they may cut spending in some ways, but that's because they literally can't keep up with the amount of money printing. I mean, they're printing $1 billion a day roughly in Canada right now. Like, the debt is through the roof. We will be over $1 trillion of debt by the end of this year, it looks like, and more than half of that. In fact, I think it's well over half that was just from the last year. And that's the problem too. Like I say, the people think that we had a decent economy going into this. No, like I pointed out earlier, we don't. Canada had almost zero growth going into this. Like I say, I think we had 0.1% and 0.2, 0.3% for the 2 quarters before the virus. So again, we were within an inch, literally, of being in recession before this virus situation. And there's no way we're getting out of it anytime soon. Even if the government stops pretending like this is doomsday and opens things back up, we're still going to be coming out of this in recession. I don't think we'll have positive growth for probably at least the next 1 or 2, probably at least a year. I would say maybe next year around this time. And I mean, the one way around that is if the government, there's ways of manipulating GDP as well. They could just manipulate that the same way they do the unemployment rate, the same way they do the stock market, all that kind of stuff is um, it is generally thought of as ways of how good the economy is doing, but you always have to take that kind of stuff with a grain of salt. But again, the point being is that the economy is not very good, and a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people think, oh, phew, we're out of the woods. We don't got to worry about this whole virus thing anymore. But the reality is that's not true. I imagine there's going to be, kids are going back to school. Um, if there's the slightest uptick in cases, then all these Karens are going to be all paranoid and they're going to want to shut things down again, and we're going to start this mess all over again. So again, the main point, I guess, being is we're not out of the woods yet. So anyway, if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you also follow me on Twitter, on BitChute, and on Parler. All those links are in the description, so you can find them all there.